about our national plan to ensure that we can live with this virus. The national plan we have developed and agreed is our pathway to living with this virus. That is our goal, to live with this virus, not to live in fear of it. It is a plan based on the best possible scientific, medical and economic advice. I would argue available to any government in the world. We have the best people working on these issues, and it's based on the best evidence that is available to our government. It is a plan that has been developed very carefully, and I want to stress over many, many months. We began this process earlier this year. We've been through 2 iterations of the Doherty modelling to produce the national plan targets that were agreed a month or so ago. And indeed, as you will recall, the national plan was first agreed without those targets attached to it, understanding what the steps would need to be, and then with the science guiding our decisions about what those targets should be. We have been cautious during the pandemic, and that has saved lives, and it has saved livelihoods. There's no doubt about that. 30,000 lives saved, 1 million people back in work, as we have combated this virus in all of its strains over this more than 18 months now. But once you get to 70% of your country that is eligible for the vaccine, and 80%, the plan sets out that we have to move forward. We cannot hold back. Our task between that day and now is to ensure that we ready ourselves for that next phase. It means that we must continue to vaccinate at the record paces we are now doing that. We must ensure that our public health systems are ready for the increase in the number of cases that will occur. We must be clear about the rules, the common sense rules that continue to apply post 70% and post 80%, which is factored in to the work that is being done, that has been the basis of our plan. Common sense rules. And we must adjust our mindset. Cases will not be the issue once we get above 70%. Dealing with serious illness, hospitalisation, ICU capabilities, our ability to respond in those circumstances, that will be our goal. And we will live with this virus as we live with other infectious diseases. That's what the national plan is all about, was always about. That's how we designed it, and that's how it needs to be implemented. Because the national plan is our deal with all Australians. It is the understanding that we have with Australians making their sacrifices now and who have made them over such a long time, that that sacrifice will get them to the next step. Because if not at 70% and 80%, then when? Then when? We must make that move, and we must prepare to make that move, and we must prepare the country to make that move. The lockdowns now being endured are taking an extremely heavy toll, both on the mental and physical health of Australians and on the economic success of Australia. It is taking a heavy toll, and so they must only continue for as long as they are absolutely necessary, and not a day more. It is always darkest before the dawn, and I think these lockdowns are a demonstration of that. But the dawn is not far away, and we are working towards that dawn, and we are hastening towards the dawn. We should not delay it. We should prepare for it. We should not fear it. We should embrace it. And we should move forward together. There will be those who will seek to undermine the national plan. There will be those who will seek to undermine confidence in it. I think their motives are clear. But there are also those who may fear it and have concerns about what it means when you get to phase B and what it means in terms of increases in cases. Our goal must be to help people overcome those fears and not give in to them. because this cannot go on forever. This is not a sustainable way to live in this country. Without those freedoms that we all cherish, we understand, all sensible Australians understand, that there has had to be restrictions, there has had to be a curtailment of what we can do during the course of a global pandemic. The virus doesn't respect ideologies, it doesn't respect any of these things. It's just a virus and we have to deal with it. Australians get that. But equally, they also know there has to be a plan out, there is a plan out, and we need to move forward with that plan. These lockdowns, once we reach our goal, we know on the scientific, medical and economic advice do more harm than good. And so it's important that we move as quickly as we can to that next phase. And there is strong progress towards that plan. The Health Minister will outline more of this in a moment. 1.8 million vaccines in just the last 7 days. On a per capita basis, that's on par with the best ever week in the United States and better than the best ever week in the United Kingdom. Australia is hitting those records. In particular, 17.15 million doses have now been administered around the country. And I want to stress that 75% of over 50s have now had their first dose. 85% of over 70s have now had their first dose. Now, this is very important because when we reach 70%, and I had this conversation with the Chief Medical Officer this morning, when we reach 70%, those most vulnerable in the older age groups will have an even higher level of vaccination. And so our concern, of course, in those phases is for the unvaccinated. And that's why we encourage everybody to get vaccinated. But we will know when we hit that 70% and the 80% mark, we will see an even higher level of vaccination rates amongst the most elderly, who are the most vulnerable to fatality as a result of COVID-19. So we have the plan. We are making great progress to achieve the goals of that plan, and that's what I think gives Australians great hope to endure through what will still be a difficult time in the months ahead. We need to stay focused, we need to get ready, and we need to move ahead.
Thanks very much, Prime Minister and Maurice. Every vaccination protects one Australian, but every vaccination protects all Australians. And what we have seen is yesterday was a record Sunday vaccination day. It was a record weekend. As the Prime Minister said, it was a record week. And each one of those vaccinations protects an individual, but each one of those vaccinations is something that helps protect all Australians. Yesterday, 139,500 Australians were vaccinated. The first time that more than 100,000 people have been vaccinated on a Sunday, but by a long way. On the weekend, 335,500 vaccinations. Over the week, 1,811,000 Australians were vaccinated, which is more than the population of South Australia. And I want to thank everybody for coming forward. These numbers, as the Prime Minister has said, are comparable with some of the highest weekly numbers we've seen around the world. In particular, this was the first time our GPs have done more than 1 million doses in conjunction with pharmacists over a week. So our primary care outlets, more than 1 million doses. Our first doses are at 52.8%, our second doses 30.3%, and very significantly, over 50s, more than 75%, over 60s, more than 80%, over 70s, more than 85%. And all of those numbers are progressively increasing. Just to note that there's over 8,200 Commonwealth points of presence, including 5,288 GPs who are vaccinating, 137 Commonwealth Vax clinics, 182 Aboriginal community-controlled health organisation sites, and now over 2,500 pharmacies that are out in the field and vaccinating. Each one of those is a Commonwealth AstraZeneca hub. And so just as we look forward, this week there's more than 2.2 million vaccines that have been distributed for use by Australians right now. And over the coming week, we'll be distributing over 2.4 million vaccines for the week beyond. So what that says is that the supply is strong, the distribution is strong, and the uptake is phenomenal. So thank you to every Australian, but please remember the basics. If you are in a lockdown area, stay at home. If you need to be tested, please be tested. And if you're eligible for vaccination, don't hesitate. Thank you.
Frydenberg was bluffing when he said the Commonwealth would pull assistance for states and territories that locked down when vaccination rates reached 70 to 80%. He said that, effectively said that your government would not have the political courage to do that in an election year. So can we hear from you, if states and territories do lock down when those thresholds are met, will they have to do it without Commonwealth financial support?
Well, you're putting to me a hypothetical situation with respect. Why wouldn't people want to open up the country when we hit 70 and 80%? That's my point. We've agreed a national plan at 70 and 80% based on the best possible medical advice, best possible scientific advice, and best possible economic advice. We have been told very clearly that lockdowns, once you move past that level, come at more cost than gain. And so it does puzzle me. It puzzles me why anyone would want to go against a plan that has been so carefully prepared based on that advice. So I think the greater concern in that environment would be that lockdowns would be being applied. That is the greater risk to people in that scenario. Yeah.
It's a fair enough question. We've already seen Western Australia suggest that they're prepared to continue with COVID zero. We've seen Queensland, as your Minister Karen Andrews has said this morning, crab walking away from the deal. Are you prepared to show the fortitude and turn off the money tap if they don't open up the borders?
Committed to the national plan. And I can tell you what, I think Australians are too. I think 7 to 8 out of 10 Australians who've taken a decision to go forward, get vaccinated, endure these lockdowns, do what's been asked of them, I tell you, they'll be expecting that plan to be put in place. And I think the voices of Australians on this will be very critical. So let's just see what happens.
That there were people who would seek to undermine the national plan. Are you referring to states like Queensland and WA, which have been stepping around, and will you expect them to open up the borders to New South Wales once we hit those 70 and 80% vaccination rates?
Well, I wasn't specifically referring to anybody. I'm just saying, I've been around this place for a long time, and when governments put forward plans to get things done, there are always those who will seek to undermine it for their own purposes. That happens in this place every day. I suspect it'll happen later on in question time today. But my point is simply this. There are a number of things we have to overcome as we go forward with the plan. Of course, there will be those who will undermine it for political purposes, and there's no great surprise about that, and Australians will judge them accordingly. But I think I mentioned one particularly, and that there are those who might fear what would happen after 70%. And I understand that. I understand people will be concerned that cases may rise, and what will that mean? And that leads to the next issue, and that is there'll be those, will our public health systems be able to deal with that? Again, a very legitimate issue. So that's my point. To realise the plan at 70% and 80%, the task is not to walk away, the task is not to delay, the task is not to fear, the task is to embrace, prepare, plan, ensure that we're in a position to do that. Now, we've got time to achieve that, and already we're seeing our public health system stand up very strongly. And I would envisage that in the time we have between now and when we reach those targets, that there will be the opportunity to reinforce those plans for states and territories to know that they will be able to deal with this. Because we have to deal with it. Otherwise, we stay in the cave forever. And that's not a sustainable solution. And so at some point, and we have nominated what that point is, we must go to the next level. Chris.
On the hospital
system. Last year when we were locking down, the whole point was to fortify the hospital system to make sure we had the ICU beds, the ventilators, the consumables. So perhaps through you to the Health Minister as well, is all that in place? Do we have, because you've noted that case numbers will increase, obviously the pressure will increase, is the hospital system ready?
Yeah, we review this almost on a daily basis, and we certainly review it as part of a formal process through the National Cabinet every Friday. And the Secretary of the Department of Health goes through that exercise and looks at all the various capacities right across the states and territories, their current levels of utilisation. There is a document called the Common Operating Picture, which looks at many of the pressures that go into the system, and that is regularly reviewed. And that has been happening for a very long time. Because you're right, they were the first issues that were identified 18 months ago, and we have never taken our gaze off that, because at the end of the day, that is what most supports Australians and provides that backstop. So, workforce issues, plans of supporting in the contingency circumstances of cases. I don't mean COVID cases. I mean situations where states may need further help or assistance or whatever. That needs to be worked through in the same way that we work national disasters and things like that nature, and the states work together to bring the resources to where they need to go. That's the work. That work enables us to live with the virus, avoiding the day when we hit those rates. And I want to stress, I've put no faith in a calendar. There's no Freedom Day here. That's not what my plan is. I mean, a day is not going to change it. 70% is going to change it. 80% is going to change it. That's the day you get to. That's what actually drives the decision about when you can go to the next step. Now, I'm all for freedom. And the passage to that is based on clearing those gates of 70% and 80%. What day we will hit that? As soon as we possibly can. But Greg, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so just in terms of the hospital system, last year the states and territories in conjunction with the Commonwealth, I think, did an extraordinary job in building that surge capacity for 7,500 ventilated beds. At the moment, on the advice that I have before me, it's 36 people in ventilation. That figure will be updated during the morning as the state figures come in. But what we have done is create both a sustainable base and a surge capacity. And that surge capacity, which was put in place last year, these were some of the earliest discussions we had around the NSC in February of 2020. And building that, acquiring the ventilation, working with ResMed, working with international partners, means that we have a strong, robust system.
Claire?